It is wonderful to be here today. I am excited to be getting back to my teaching roots where I have supported children with various disabilities throughout my career. And so today I'm going to help hopefully all of you advocate on behalf of your children with confidence, build those collaborative relationships with schools so that our children can really reach their full potential. Just a little bit about me to get started. I was an intervention specialist and teacher for 16 years. And you've already learned a little bit about me as far as my degrees. I live in Cincinnati with my husband, my two daughters. I have a mini golden doodle on Yorkie that was not in my bio. Love them dearly. But just a little bit more about my daughters. Both of my daughters actually have IEPs. So we have been navigating school services, and it has not been easy. My first daughter, Abby, has CP. She has two rare brain conditions, schizencephaly and polymicrogyria, as well as ADHD, anxiety, right hemiparesis, sensory challenges, spasticity, epilepsy. She has braces, and she uses a wheelchair for long distances. And why do I rattle all of that off? Because each one of those things has played a critical role in the support services that we have had to advocate for my daughter. Every single one of those things is something that we have had to think about and talk about with the school. And I'm sure there's even more that I haven't thought about. Um, the other thing that I did not put in there about my first daughter is that she also really struggles with mental and behavioral health. And so her rare brain conditions are in her left frontal lobe, and obviously that's where all of your social and emotional regulation is. And so that proves to be a large challenge. And so throughout her educational journey, we are consistently needing to educate the staff about how her behavior actually links to her condition. And so many of you who have narcolepsy or have children with narcolepsy, sleep is wildly important for children. And taking away that can lead to various different symptoms. And so we have to consider how that disability is really impacting children in the educational setting. My second daughter has ADHD, dyslexia, and anxiety. She is the one who actually attends a private school, but is specifically for children with ADHD and dyslexia. My first daughter, who has the two rare brain conditions, she now attends public school. We started in private, but the rules are not the same in private school. Ironically, she got more services in private school, but the private school would not tolerate any emotional or behavioral challenges as we were going through medication changes due to her two rare brain conditions and epilepsy. And so, but the public school navigates that much better, but provides less services by way of PT, OT speech. So it is really interesting. Our educational system is so complex. It is so diverse from state to state, school to school. And so as you're listening to me speak today, I want you to think about the resources in your community. And some resources are much more abundant than others. Some school districts have absolutely no resources, not even speech and language pathologists. And so, thinking about that, what are your rights as a parent? You do have some, and your child is entitled to certain services under some federal laws that I'll talk about today. I also put in here a picture of Abby with her favorite doctor of all time. He actually did my daughter's selective dorsal rhizotomy, a spinal surgery, but she doesn't remember that. She remembers him playing with her. She remembers the emotional connection and the interaction. And the same thing goes for schools. Both of my daughters will talk about the teachers that loved them. Those were their favorite. And so it's really important to think about how your child responds to different kinds of teachers and different kinds of specialists, and communicate that to the school. It can make all the difference in the world. So this is my daughter's favorite doctor right here, Dr. Leonard, who I was speaking of earlier, and then just a picture of my family. So my first daughter is 10. She's in fourth grade. My second one is 12, and she is in seventh grade. Um, that matters only because we've been through it. We've been through the journey, early intervention, preschool, both private and public schools, and we'll be going on to high school here soon as well, which is another thing that we will navigate. I have nothing to disclose. So by the end of this session, what I really hope you'll take away is I hope that you'll understand the differences between a 504 plan and an IEP, and not just understand what they are, but how you can advocate for those two different plans. Recognize how conditions like ADHD, anxiety, depression, narcolepsy, and learning differences can affect school performance. I hope you are able to explain the key components of an IEP, including the goals, accommodations, and the review processes, and then learn practical strategies on how you can advocate for your child, and communicate effectively with the educational team. It is ultimately about the relationships you are going to build with this team. And then finally, what helpful resources are out there to support your child's educational rights and progress? I will say the list that I offer is limited. There are so many. I could go on and on. This whole presentation could be about resources. So if you're looking for something specific, please don't hesitate at the end to ask or to reach out and ask me later. Okay, so where do we start? Let's start with the history because the history is incredibly important when it comes to disabilities. So you may have heard of IDEA. It's Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is the key law that was put into place that really protects your child's rights in the disability world. And so the IDEA sections each disability sections, I should say, the group of disabilities into categories. So you have autism spectrum disorder, specific learning disabilities, intellectual disability, and so on and so forth. A lot of times, these are the specific 13 categories that every state will have. However, some states do differ and they split these up. So they might put ADHD in their own category. Mental and behavioral health might look a little bit different, but these are the general categories that are protected under the law. A lot of kids with developmental delays early on will get that developmental delay category. You must qualify under one of these categories in order to have an IEP. When you're going through the evaluation process, the team will determine in which one of these areas does it make most sense for your child to qualify under. So a lot of times narcolepsy will be here under, it could be under other health impairment. But you may have a situation where your child has a specific learning disability, and that is the main thing contributing to their struggles in the classroom. And so your child could fit under multiple categories. And it's important to think about which category is the number one contributor to your child's educational delay. Once your child is evaluated, then they can receive an IEP. An IEP is also protected under this same IDEA law. An IEP, and we'll talk about it further, but it provides that specialized instruction and accommodations for children. So think about reading support from an intervention specialist or occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. Those are all covered under an IEP. Then there's a second law that many kids are also able to qualify under. So let's say that a child needs a minor accommodation to help them be successful in the classroom setting. That would fall under the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So you'll hear 504 plan versus an IEP, and a lot of people say, what's the difference? Well, we'll go into that in a minute, but essentially a 504 is just for looking at accommodations. And so when we think about preferential seating. So maybe all your child really needs to be successful is to sit at the front of the class so that they can hear the teacher better and be less distracted. So that would be an example of an accommodation. But once they get that accommodation, they're successful in the classroom. So they don't really need any other specific individualized instruction to help support them. Another example would be breaks. So they might just not be able to sit there for a long period of time without getting up and moving around. So they can build in breaks to a child's schedule. Once they get those breaks, they're good to go. They can perform wonderfully in the classroom and keep up with their peers. So it's important to understand the difference between these two things. Some people just may need accommodations, while others need a different type of instruction altogether to help them be successful. So here are some of the basics. Let's say that your child qualifies for after the evaluation, they've been through the evaluation, and they qualify, or you're trying to decide whether they qualify for an IEP. You can request at any point in time, if you see your child struggling, an evaluation to see if your child fits into one of those disability categories. If you have a diagnosis from a medical professional, it's always really helpful to let the school know that already. Any outside testing you have can be extremely beneficial in informing whether they qualify for services. When you're requesting an evaluation, these are just some simple guidelines. Make sure you include your student's name, grade, and school. And oh, by the way, who are you sending this to? You can send this to the principal, your school psychologist, your special education director. Those are really important key people that can kind of get this process started. And not every school has a school psychologist or, it varies. So it's important to kind of know who is in charge of special education at your school and then maybe even at your district level. So you're gonna ask for, or you're gonna include in your evaluation your relationship to the student, a clear statement requesting a special education evaluation under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. A brief description of your concerns. So maybe your teacher has said, you know what, they are really falling behind in math. They are not keeping up, or they're having trouble reading, or, it could be a lot of different things. But a lot of times teachers will put those things in writing at conferences um, or email you. Save all of that documentation all the time. And then once you send off this email, giving a brief description of your concerns, request in writing a confirmation that it has been received. Here's why. This request for an evaluation is time sensitive. So legally, the school has so much time to respond to your request for an evaluation. Just because you request doesn't mean that they have to say yes or that they will say yes. Sometimes they will deny your request. And I'll tell you some ways in which they will do that. Other times they'll say, we see these concerns too. Let's get an evaluation started. I think the more information you can provide, the more documentation you can provide, you have evidence to support your request for an evaluation. If you are denied, so let's say they say, nope, we have them in an intervention program and they are making progress. You can request something called a prior written notice that explains their decision. This is really important because whatever they put back in that request can really help you in determining next steps. Maybe they say, you know, we don't see them struggling at all. As a matter of fact, their report card shows that they've had, this, and this completely successful in the classroom. They're getting great grades, all of these things. To which you could respond, they might be getting good grades, but um, we're seeing them struggle with keeping up with the writing assignments. They're having a really difficult time. Or, their speech has some major errors and it makes them really uncomfortable to talk in front of the classroom. You can respond with why you are requesting these things. It is really important that you disagree in writing and request a meeting or mediation. Now, I am not a fan of always going to legal aid. That is not at all what I'm telling you. Matter of fact, I think the best thing to do is to sit down and have a meeting. You want to discuss what exactly have you seen? What have the teachers seen? Um, where are we aligned? And focus on where we're aligned. Yep, I see that they're having issues in this specific area, and I would like to make sure that they're getting support because here's how it's impacting them. Or maybe they're struggling so much at school that when they get home, it is like a ticking time bomb, and they can't complete any of the homework. They don't understand anything they learned in school that day. Those conversations can lead to solutions. So maybe we don't actually have to evaluate right away, but maybe we can put some interventions in place prior to that will make things work. Um, if you do have to get to the point where you seek support from an advocate, I highly recommend you look for an advocate that is collaborative and not adversarial. You'll be able to tell by talking with someone. Are they immediately going, we're going to take them down, or we can file this or file that? Or are they saying, let's get the information, let's see what they're saying, and let's provide some evidence as to why we think the support would be beneficial, or here's evidence to support our claims that they are falling behind. Um, and so that way, we're really approaching this with facts instead of emotion. And this is very emotional. It's our children. So I'm not saying this isn't emotional. I mean, I have cried over school things before. So I get it as a parent. It is very emotional. Um, but we have to look at facts. And if we can back those facts up with those two laws, IDEA or the 504, then we are able to make more progress because we have evidence and we have the law on our side in respect to supporting students with disabilities. Let's say that you get an evaluation, but they say your child didn't qualify. And they've utilized one evaluation tool for reading, and they're like, no, they seem fine. But all the evidence that your teacher provided you showed you that they're not fine. They're not reading fluently, or they're really struggling in one area or another. One of the best things you can do is ask how many evaluations were completed and in what areas. Because we schools are required to look at a child comprehensively, and some assessments only look at particular areas. So maybe the area that they looked at wasn't the area that was the area of need. Maybe they used the wrong assessment for that, or maybe they needed to use another assessment to be able to clearly pinpoint what that area of need is. So we can actually use more than one assessment. The other thing that you want to look at is are we assessing for the correct thing? So for instance, ADHD versus a learning disability. A lot of kids with ADHD have a learning disability, but sometimes it is just ADHD and not a learning disability that is impacting their education. So the types of testing you would do would be different than the types of testing you would do for learning disability. They might blow the learning disability test out of the water. Wow, they scored really high. And kids with ADHD they can score really, really high on an assessment academically, but they cannot focus and they're failing all their work in the classroom. They're hearing it, but they're not able to organize their thoughts and their processes and get it down on paper or answer the questions. They're not focused enough. And so we have to look at specifically what is the area of concern and how do we assess that. So here are some key features. You've heard me talk back and forth about 504s and IEPs. So what is the big difference here? And you'll see in this chart, very simplified. I loved this graphic over here because they're working on the I and the individualized. So IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan. Sometimes what we get is a lot of professionals who are very used to writing all this paperwork, and they tend to write the same goals and not really individualize them. So that's kind of the joke behind this picture, is that we really need to make sure that we're looking at each individual child and their need. One child with narcolepsy is not going to look like the next child with narcolepsy. And so we have to see what supports we could put in place. One child might need a 504 plan. Another child might need an IEP. And so it's really important that we individualize each child. We look at them individually and make sure we are assessing what is needed. So a 504 plan is really just accommodations. Again, that goes back to just taking breaks or preferential seating or extended time on a test. Those are accommodations that can support children in the classroom. They don't need any sort of individualized instruction, different reading intervention, or anything like that. Um, this is generally managed by either a gen ed teacher and a school counselor or some administrative staff, but it is not handled usually by the special education team. They might consult the special education team and say, hey, I have this unique case. Do you have fidgets or do you have other tools that would help support or accommodate this student? But generally speaking, the special education team, the OT, PT, speech, intervention specialist, they are not the ones who are managing a 504 plan. The general education teacher can provide these accommodations in the classroom just fine. And a 504 plan is much, much leaner. It is a very simple plan. It does not take a lot to read through. There are simple accommodations that are included in that plan. An individualized education plan that falls under IDEA. And so that means that you're getting specialized instruction. So maybe you're not, you may be in the classroom getting the same reading support, but maybe you're pulled to a back table or someone's helping you in the classroom to be able to access the curriculum. They're changing it in some way. They're giving you some sort of specialized instruction. A lot of schools will pull kids out with like dyslexia or something like that to give them a specialized curriculum that meets their individualized needs. The IEP is managed by the special education team. It is usually reviewed, it is always reviewed annually. It has to be annually. And then you will have progress reports in between. And it is a very lengthy, long document, which is why I will kind of break it down for you. And I can't show you a specific IEP because every single state's document looks different, which can be infuriating if you're a traveling family or you move from state to state. It's a little bit difficult, but the key components are always the same, and they're always the things that you should really look for. By the way, I think I missed talking about the elephant in the room really quickly, and I'll go back to this because I put over here, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And so I'm sure some of you are like, okay, Kim, what is the elephant in the room? Well, if any of you have been keeping track of what's been going on federally right now, the education department has been a lot bit dismantled. IDEA and the 504, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act are huge components of the education department because they are the ones who monitor whether these laws are being followed. Does that mean they're the only ones who can do that? No. And so the concern amongst some is that who is going to monitor this? The federal government currently wants the control to go back to the states. They want the states to be able to control what happens in the disability and the curriculum world. They don't want the federal government to be controlling that. And so the answer is we don't really actually know right now what's happening as far as how this will impact the disability world. I'm assuming that it'll be a state by state challenge, which to be honest with you, I think education in general has been a state by state challenge. I think that, you know, it's always, we're always going to have to advocate on behalf of our children, no matter what state you're in. So the rules and the laws haven't changed. They're still there. You can still, if your rights are not, you're not being fulfilled, then you can still go the legal route. There's nothing to say that you can't go through the court system. As a matter of fact, most of these laws have been further defined by court cases, and I'll give you a resource for that later on. But all that to say, the best thing that we can do here as a disability community is stand together and continue to advocate for our children, making sure that they're getting the individual supports they need and collaborating with the school districts to make that happen. Some of the best solutions to education problems have come from parents and families stepping in, chipping in. Special education is not cheap. It is one of the most expensive services that is provided by a school district. It's so worth it. But it is definitely something that is not reimbursed adequately. And so they have to try to do a lot with very little, which is, I think, honestly, what we all deal with, as parents of children who have unique healthcare needs. And so just keep in mind that while things are changing and they're shifting, you still have your feet on the ground with your child in your district. And so that hasn't changed. The overarching laws have not changed. There are still supports, there are still advocates out there, there's still legal aid out there to support you. So none of that has changed. So all that to say, who knows if it will in the future? So just keep a pulse on it, continue to work and collaborate with your teams. It's the best thing you can do. Okay, so let's say you are kind of in the very beginning, you notice something's going on with your child. Maybe you got the narcolepsy diagnosis that you've been waiting on for a while, and your child has been struggling in school, but they've started your child in something called response to intervention, or RTI, maybe called something else. It's basically, I'm going to put them in an intervention group before ever evaluating or going through the IEP process. I'm going to put them in an intervention group to see if simple interventions will help them make progress. It could be for academics, it could be for behaviors, it could be really for anything. But they want to see if the student makes progress with these interventions that are put in place. And the progress is consistently and repetitively monitored. Now, remember that while this process is happening, that does not deny or delay your ability to ask for an evaluation. So you could be in the middle of this process and still as a parent, you can ask for an evaluation to see if your child would qualify for an IEP or a 504. And one of the things I will tell you is that RTI is great for putting into place interventions that will help students catch up if they're able to catch up. And you'll see that. But if a student is not able to catch up, or they need significant intervention in order to make minimal progress, or the school tells you they're in RTI, and they're making some progress, so we don't really see a need to evaluate. But are they making significant progress to the point where we're catching up to peers? Or are we making progress, but then we're continually falling farther and farther and farther behind our peers as they take off? All of those things are really important to monitor. A student showing that slow progress through RTI may still even struggle significantly with support. And so you can utilize the data from RTI as a case for support for an evaluation or an IEP. So that data can really help. Schools will also sometimes use this process to delay an evaluation. And they'll say, nope, they can't be evaluated because we're seeing minimal progress. You can always request an evaluation. And if you think that is what you should do for your child because they are not making the gains, put it in writing, just like we said before. Start that process, because then the school has so much time to respond. And all of that documentation is really, really important. So another thing, a school cannot deny an evaluation just because the student is making some progress in RTI. And you will see that a lot, especially in the early years from kindergarten to third grade. And you may ask why? Why would they do that? Because, as I said before, special education is expensive. And the more students you have qualifying in kindergarten, the more intervention specialists you need, the more support staff you need, and it's expensive. And so I don't think that they don't want to support children. I think their budgets are so limited. And that unfortunately delays the evaluation process. But you don't have to wait, because as a parent, you can request, or a caregiver, you can request an evaluation at any point in time. So please do that if that is something that you're concerned about. So let's talk about your child got an evaluation. They have their disability category. We are now in the process of writing the IEP. So the school is going to come to you and they're going to say, can you tell me all about your child? Is there any medical information that we should know about? Have they had their hearing tested? Have they had their vision tested? All of those things are really important and can contribute to the background and present levels of performance. This background really, really helps determine the goals and support. So the more information you can give, even about what's happening at home, because that can be a sign of whether your child is doing well at school as well. So if your child's coming home and they're throwing a fit and they are just losing it when they walk through the door, or maybe they are just falling asleep and they sleep through the whole entire night and then you're not waking them up to the next morning, and there's no time to do homework, right? And that's going to impact them eventually, from a perspective, especially as you get into those older years in high school and things of that nature. Also, keep in mind that things like anxiety, depression, um, all of those can also impact your school performance and will fall under they put it as emotional disturbance, which I don't love. Some people will put it there, some people will put it under other health impairment as a category. But regardless, that is a medical diagnosis that could contribute to your child's school performance. So keep that in mind. Um, as much information as you can give that information. Tell them what your nights are like, and tell them what works well for your child, what doesn't work, what they have some aversion to. All of that information is incredibly important. My background and present level of performance for both of my kids is so long because I literally give them everything and they just continue to copy and paste it from year to year. And I don't know if that's best practice. It probably is not best practice. It's not actually, but because we want the present level, but you can at least see where they've been. And you can get medical information, things that would be pertinent for the school to know about the child. So um, let's see. So next is the goals and objectives. The goals must be measurable. So they will complete 10 single digit addition problems in um, 2 minutes with 90% accuracy, whatever it may be, but you can definitely calculate how well they've done. If it's a behavior, um, maybe we will make it through lunchtime, you know, 5 lunchtimes in a row with not hitting anyone or something. I don't know. That's a terrible example, but you know what I mean. You can make them social. You can make them behavioral. You can make them academic goals. Really, they could be goals in all areas. If your child has some behavioral concerns, um, they can write what's called a behavior intervention plan. A lot of places will use a tool called an antecedent behavior consequence model, meaning they look at the behavior, they look at what comes before the behavior and what comes after the behavior to determine if there is any sort of commonality there. Can we find a pattern? What is triggering this behavior? Is the child doing this behavior because it's attention seeking? And that can really help inform what's called a behavior intervention plan. So it's kind of like a second plan to the IEP that helps specifically focus on behavior and supports for behavior. So keep that in mind. That's kind of another component that can be added to um, an IEP. And I will also say that if your child struggles with dangerous behaviors, or maybe they say things that are inappropriate, please get a behavior intervention plan, because if they're saying things in this day and age that could get them in trouble, you need to have the backing to show that that's related to their disability. It's incredibly important. Um, so the measurable and achievable goals, let's say as you get through the IEP process, the goals aren't being met. That doesn't mean that the goals change and we make them easier. That means that the intervention needs to change because something that we're doing is not helping this child make the progress that they need to make. We are initially making these goals measurable and achievable. And if something is not working along the way and goals aren't being met, then we need to do something different. The intervention needs to change. Maybe we need to increase time. Maybe we need to have the intervention in a different setting. I don't know. Depends on the child, but there are lots of options. Doesn't mean that you make the goals easier. Um, the other really, really, really important section to an IEP is the accommodations versus the modifications. I have actually given leeway when it comes to goals and objectives if the accommodations and modifications are exactly what I want, because I know if the accommodations and the modifications are working for my child, that those goals are going to be achieved and then some. So think about an accommodation could be extra time. It could be that you have a scribe, someone writing for your child. It could be that your or a modification. I'll give a modification example. My daughter with CP has a really difficult time writing a lot of content, and so we have agreed that it is quality over quantity for her. So we will reduce content. She will also get simplified content as well. So think about all the different ways in which you could add supports or change something to make the learning environment more accommodating for your child. I would say if I had to pick one of these areas that I hone in on every single time, it would be accommodations and modifications because that can make or break um, your child's time at school, how much they're supported there. And then finally, signing and reviewing the document. So you can request to see the IEP at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. Ideally, you've been talking with your team the entire school year, so you already have a relationship built with them. You pretty much know what's going to be in that IEP because you've been having those conversations. But do take the time to review before you sign the IEP, especially if you're not getting it a week in advance, to have those conversations back and forth before the meeting. Um, you need to be able to ask questions. You need to have them clarify anything you don't understand. Do not sign on the same exact day if you don't feel like something is right in the IEP. Give it time. You are not required to sign that IEP that day. Now, if you've already seen that IEP, you've been in communication, things are already changed, and you go in there that day and you're like, yep, I know everything that's in this IEP. We've already had this communication back and forth. Um, Go ahead and sign it. There's no reason not to. If it's a contentious relationship and you're not getting the things that your child needs to be supportive, time is on your side. Wait it out. You can say, I just really don't feel comfortable signing this because I don't feel like my child is supported. Here are the things that I think would best support my child. And remember that you can call a meeting any time in the year, not just annually. So you do not just have to meet once a year. And you shouldn't be. You should be meeting more than that, just to be able to talk about the accommodations. And a lot of times that'll be over conferences, but I know with my daughter's intervention specialist, we talk all the time through their app that they have at school. The more communication, the better your relationship. They'll come to you and say, hey, what do you want to see in the IEP? What do you think makes sense? Here's what I'm thinking. Do you think anything else should be added? And that is the kind of dialogue. That's the type of collaboration that we really want to see going, into the supports for children. So some practical advice for you. Communicate very early, especially if your child is transitioning. So transition periods from school to school, transition period, like major transition periods, preschool to kindergarten. Maybe your child's going into a middle school. Maybe they're going into high school. Maybe they're transitioning into the adult world. Communicate, communicate, communicate with that next step. Communicate before school starts. Make sure that they're aware of any medication changes. If we make medication changes for my daughters, I am always messaging their teachers, hey, just a heads up, we switched medications this weekend. Here's what we've been seeing, but please let me know if you see anything concerning. And they are super happy about that. Maybe you had a rough morning or the night before was absolutely atrocious. I think every single time that I've ever communicated to a teacher that we had a rough morning or a rough night, they were so accommodating. They understood and they said, "Oh, we've got it. Don't worry about homework for that night. Just do it over the weekend or whenever you can get it done or whatever makes sense." But they talking through that with them and communicating with them about what's happening in your life is totally okay. You'll be surprised, I think, how much schools really will lean in when you lean in. Don't forget to tell them what soothes your child, what sets your child off. I mean, this even goes into high school. What sets your child off in high school? Are there things that are just really irritating or a time of the day that's worse for them? Communicate all of that. Involve your doctors, your therapists, anyone you think will help the staff understand your child's needs or work with your child. That even goes into respite care providers, behavioral health therapists, any of those people are great at being able to communicate with the school and let them understand what helps that child because everyone has a unique relationship and a unique perspective, and it's important to communicate that. Um, Always, always, always think safety first, especially if there is a major safety concern and they're not taking your request for an evaluation or if you want to make a change to an IEP, they're not taking that seriously. I'm really concerned that my child is going to get hurt. I'm really concerned, that my child may hurt someone else. All of those things are possibilities, and always be thinking from the frame of mind, safety, safety, safety. Whenever you say, I'm concerned for a safety perspective, usually red flags go up. And finally, I put this little note in here because I always think about this. Don't forget about the siblings to your affected child. They are impacted as well. They see what's happening. And even though you may not think they're impacted, they're impacted. They hear the conversations that you have. And you might want to inform their teachers. It was a really rough night last night. Or their sibling just screamed or whatever it may be. Let their teachers know as well, because we oftentimes forget about the siblings and the ways in which they're impacted. So I just wanted to give a few examples of how we can frame um, conversations with our school professionals and our team, because it really is about advocating for your child. And advocacy doesn't mean that we are adversarial, right? We can be collaborative and still advocate. So my first example here, I'd like to work together to ensure my child is receiving the support they need to succeed. Could we discuss the possibility of a full evaluation to better understand their needs? Maybe you say this at a conference in your own way, not this way probably, but maybe you say this at a conference and it isn't well received. What do you do then? Put it in writing. Always put it in writing. I want to revisit this that we talked about at the conference. Here's why. Use those steps that I gave you previously in this presentation, and really get them to think a little bit more about why you're requesting that evaluation. Maybe you're thinking, my child is really, really struggling. I'm getting notes all the time from school that my child's struggling. And so maybe you want to say, you know what, I want to make sure my child's current accommodations are really helping them make progress. Can we review the supports and see if any adjustments might help? You're welcome to do that at any point in the year. You've just called a meeting. If you do this verbally and it doesn't work, again, put it in writing. We've noticed these specific challenges in class and at home. I want to partner with you to address them effectively. Could we explore whether additional supports might be beneficial? Based on recent observations and assessments, it seems my child may need some extra support. Could we meet to discuss potential changes to the IEP? Always fair. Again, you're giving an invitation, right? An invitation to meet. You're not saying, I'm going straight to my advocate, I'm going straight here or there. You want to sit down with them and collaborate and figure out, how are we going to solve this problem together? Can we schedule a meeting to review my child's progress and discuss next steps together? Maybe you want to do that before an IEP meeting, but you could do it, maybe halfway through. It's not working out. I'm not seeing the progress. How can we pivot or change the way we're doing things so that we do see that progress? I'd appreciate looking at the progress monitoring data together so we can determine the best supports moving forward. This especially relates, this could be for IEP or even that RTI process, that response to intervention stage. Let's look at this data. How quickly are we moving? Are we making, such small gains that it's really not a lot that we're seeing, even with this extra support? Um, or are we taking off? And this is all great news and we get to celebrate. Those are my very collaborative ways. Now, emphasizing the student needs. So really focusing on student needs. My goal is for my child to access the curriculum fully and make steady progress. I'd love to brainstorm strategies and supports. And you may even find that they come up with um, some supports you never thought of. Or maybe you have supports at home that you do regularly that they have never thought of. That's what this is about. I want to partner with you to make sure my child has what they need to thrive academically and socially. Could we explore some options together? Awesome. Still inviting that collaboration. Now we have some gentle escalation. So maybe they're just really not receptive. If we can't resolve this right away, I'd appreciate some guidance on next steps to ensure we're doing everything possible to support my child's learning. See what they say. I want to make sure we're following federal and state guidelines and that my child's needs are being fully addressed. Can you help me understand the options? Another really good one that I've heard too, and that I've actually used is about a free, appropriate public education. Legally, they're required to provide a free, appropriate public education. I want to make sure that my child is getting that appropriate education. So just I'm going to go over this very quickly because we're running a little bit out of time, but some legal insights, some things that schools are required to provide. So education at no cost to the family in public schools, not private. Special education and related services. Related services are OT, PT, speech, behavioral health, that are tailored to that student's individual needs, not collectively. So we don't write the goal based on what my group intervention is working on. We don't do that. Preparation for further education, employment, and independent living. So if you have a child that's transitioning to the adult world, this is definitely a component that needs to be talked about and is oftentimes not. Appropriate evaluation. So they must evaluate a student in all areas of suspected disability before eligibility decisions. The evaluations must be comprehensive, non-discriminatory, so it needs to be given in the language that that student primarily speaks, and use multiple tools and methods. So that's where I was talking about those assessments previously, using multiple assessments, multiple tools to evaluate a student's needs. And then parents have the right to consent to evaluations, but they can also request an independent educational evaluation as well outside of the school. And I have utilized that before to be able to show the assessment that you're using isn't showing anything, but when they do this assessment, here's what this shows. This shows significant dyslexia. And so you have that outside evaluation. And then services required under IDEA, specialized instruction, those related services, supplementary aids and services, so that students can participate in the general education setting. If they need an assistant or they need a one-on-one aid, those are often topics that families talk about. My school won't give me a one-on-one aid for my child, but they're tube fed, or we need a nurse for my child to be able to participate in everyday activities. I had a parent reach out to me about that recently, and the school was unwilling to provide support so that that child could participate in school. So think about all of those different considerations. There are many. Procedural safeguards, you'll see there's a packet they give you of all of your rights. As a parent, they must provide that to you, and it'll give you all the information about going through mediation, due process hearings, and state complaint procedures. Ultimately, we want our students in the least restrictive environment. The more students engage with their other peers, there's actually proven research to show that they develop better when we give them access to their peers, their non-disabled peers, as much as humanly possible. And quite frankly, it does a world of good for those peers who don't have disabilities as well. So I think, the least restrictive environment is really, really important. Think about where your child needs to be. Can they be in the gen ed classroom with an assistant there? Do they really have to be pulled out of the classroom for all of their intervention services? Those are just questions to think about and ask yourself. Most importantly, remember that quality of life is the most important thing. Your child spends more time at school than they likely do with you. And so it's important that they're happy, that they're successful in school. Meaningful accommodations and modifications can literally make all the difference in the world. So I'll give you a resource here in a minute that has a wealth of accommodations and modifications that likely you have never thought about before in your life. But you go, oh, yeah, absolutely. That would be such a help for my child. And then also pick your battles. I don't love, as a former intervention specialist, the way that some of the IEP goals that I've seen for my daughters are written. I would never write them that way. But if my accommodations and modifications will support the learning of my child, there are times when I can let it go. So I can let it go that it's not written the way in which I would like it to be written, but I understand what they're getting at and how they're trying to approach my daughter moving forward. I am not going to nitpick every word that's in the IEP. I want to make sure that my daughter's needs are met, that we have the proper accommodations and modifications, that the goals are going to help her, progress to that next level. Also, I've heard so many parents say, I cannot ask for an evaluation. I cannot send that letter to the principal. If you don't advocate for your child, who will? I've been in schools before where the principal will not listen to the teacher. So the teacher can advocate all day long, but when it comes down to it, the principal will not listen to the teacher. So you have to advocate for your child. Finally, some wonderful resources. Wright's Law is fantastic. Their website can be a little bit difficult, but if you want to know all the ins and the outs of your legal rights, you will find it there, I promise you. They have some wonderful books as well. The Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance. You're thinking, Kim, why are you recommending a surgery group to us? Because you will see on that website a ton of information that you will be able to relate to, no matter who you are and no matter what condition your child has. It is phenomenal. Even if your child has not had epilepsy surgery, they don't have epilepsy at all, their resources for accommodations and modifications are impressive. And I'm a former intervention specialist. I wish I had this resource all my life. It is wonderful. Go there. You can learn about the IEP process in more details and bite-sized chunks. You can also see an entire Excel spreadsheet on literally every component that you could potentially want to write an IEP goal on, or any accommodations or modifications that any child could potentially need. So go there. It's great. Don't ever underestimate your State Department of Education and the resources that they provide. They have a lot. Local parent support groups and nonprofits, super important. Sometimes you might even have a support group in your own neck of the woods. And at the Child Neurology Foundation, we have our family support program. We provide social, emotional, and social service support to families, including support with IEPs. You are welcome to contact us at any point in time. We are happy to help you navigate any school situation that you have. For your older students, they may want to actually understand their IEP and help write the IEP themselves. This Understanding My IEP is a great resource. And for younger students, this is an all about me. I do this every single year for my daughters, where I let the teachers know all about them. What do they like? What do they don't like? What do they not like? What supports could we put in place to help them? What are we dealing with right now? Because it does change depending on medications and where we are with epilepsy control and all of those things. So it's important to just consistently keep the lines of communication open. And then I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Wake Up Narcolepsy for hosting me. Please do not ever hesitate to reach out. I'm always here as a resource. And every state is different in some ways, but just know that federally, those two main laws are what protect our students, and those have not changed. And I don't anticipate them changing. Fingers crossed. I don't anticipate them going away. They've been around for quite some time. So thank you so much.